Joining me now is Rashad RICHEY. He is the former director of the Democratic Party of Georgia. He is a radio show host of the Rashad RICHEY Morning Show, editor-at-large for Rolling Out Magazine. You can hear him on 1380 WAOK, V103 in Atlanta, and CBS 46 in Atlanta. I lived in Atlanta for some time. Dr. RICHEY, how are you? It is such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Man, it's an honor to be here with you, brother. Thank you for having me.
The pleasure is ours. I wish we had better circumstances for us to speak, but the things that are happening around the country right now really beg for analysis and insight of your magnitude. What's happening in Kenosha, Wisconsin, with the attempted murder, in my opinion, of Jacob Blake. And then also last night, we saw the white supremacist militia take the lives of two protesters. Just kind of give me an overview of what you saw when you saw that video.
Well, I saw an attempted murder just like you. Let's look at what's really happening. You had a male who was walking away. Understand this, walking away, and he was killed. OK, police officers have four non-lethal ways they can handle an individual. They have their police stick, they have mace, they have a taser, and they also have their combat training. You mean to tell me that multiple officers cannot subdue a man who is simply walking away from them? If you're that kind of cop, you really need to reanalyze why you are working in that position if you can't subdue one man who's walking away from you without killing them, okay, or without trying to kill them. In addition to that, look at the carelessness of life here, right? You had children inside of that vehicle where those gunshots were fired. That, to me, should tell the rest of the story. If you didn't care about his life, you definitely don't care about the lives that are connected to him. And so now he's fighting for his life. But I believe 100% that this was unavoidable. The police did not have to attempt to murder this guy and shoot him 7 times in the back.
But every time we see something like this, and I know you've come across this because you've been covering these stories for years, but there seems to always be the desire to explain away, to make justification. And in this case, they've done what they always do with every single person who's a victim of police violence, particularly black people. They dig up their past. How do you address that? And how do you feel about having to continuously address things that police officer couldn't possibly have known in that moment?
So let me first say something about my last statement. When I say unavoidable, I'm talking about the protests that are happening right now, the civil unrest. Yeah. Let's talk about this this default setting where people, they'll look at a case like this, where there's an unarmed individual, nonviolent. He's shot in the back. He's dead. Did he commit some type of minor crime? Perhaps. We don't even know that. His attorney says he was actually there resolving a domestic dispute, not creating one. So we don't know those facts. But here's what we do know. The default setting is this. Let's now make the victim, let's now make that individual somebody to be feared. Well, that person is the one who has been shot, right? And it's always this, let's go back through the history and try to vilify the individual who is the victim. Now, granted, the police officers aren't aware of everything that's happening inside of the mind of this young man, but they never do. You never know what's happening inside of the mind of anybody. So how can that be an excuse for you drawing your weapon and shooting somebody because you're not quite sure about what's in the mind of somebody else? If that's the case, brother, that means that we have given license to every gun carrying cop in America to kill people based on what they think is in the parameters of their mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The things in Kenosha increased, the tenseness there increased over the weekend and overnight when a white supremacist militia group showed up to, quote unquote, assist the police officers there, resulting in 3 individuals getting shot, 2 of them being killed by a 17-year-old young militia man. Who turns out, according to BuzzFeed, to be a Donald Trump supporter. Yet the president of the United States made no comment about those murders, nor did he make any comment about the actions of his supporter. But he did declare that he was going to send in the National Guard and federal agents to suppress or to stamp out the protests. What are your thoughts on the president?
Here's the thing. He's not going to come out strong against this murderer because this murderer is allied to him in ideology and philosophy. So because of that one factor alone, he will not come out hard against this killer. Let's look at what has happened. You have a guy who's pictured on the front row at Trump rallies. You have someone who is an extreme militant, likely connected to more militia groups. And I saw a video earlier today where he was walking side by side with law enforcement. Right. Here's my argument tonight. My argument is very simple. This young man, 17 years of age, has been radicalized by the president of the United States.
Simple, plain and simple as that. You mentioned the fact that he was walking side by side by police officers. I saw that video as well. And in that video, the police officers not only walked side by side with the actual murderer, but they gave water out to the white militia groups. And they even expressed gratitude, thanking them for being there. What does that say to you about the nature of police forces across this country, particularly in that city, that they would show gratitude to white supremacist militia groups?
Well, it shows you the ideology inside of the cultural matrix of law enforcement. There exists this sentiment that this is an us and them battle, right? And the them, they are basically foreign to the us. Here's what's happening with police departments all over the country. They are being summarily judged because of incidents like this. If you're a good cop, great. I'm glad that we still have good cops in the world. But if you are a good cop, and you say nothing about the bad policing that you see, the constitutional violations, you're not as good as you think you are. When you go to church on Sunday, you go to Bible study on Wednesday, you kiss your wife and kids, or the other way around, think about who you serve. Because if you just serve an agenda that protects the systemic order of white supremacy, racism, bigotry in the United States, then you are protecting an evil enterprise, and you have to check your soul for that.
I appreciate that. I want to ask you something about you and your work as a political commentator. You've covered these stories for years, and it seems like these stories never change. It seems like it's the same thing, different day and a different hashtag. How do you keep up with this? Because I found in my 5 years of doing this, covering even a friend of mine who was killed by police officers, it gets weary, especially when you have to debunk so many lies and so many different ways that they try to justify the murder and the dehumanization of people, particularly Black people. How do you push through that?
Man, with much difficulty. Here's how I look at my job, and you should look at your job the same, because you do the exact same thing. We are administrators of truth. We administer truth on a daily basis. That is a calling. I believe that those who watch this program, those who understand what truth is, and they're willing to stand in the truth and proclaim that truth, you have a much bigger calling than just what's around you, than just yourself. And I take that calling seriously, and so I endeavor to continue to do so. But it is getting so volatile to where now the truth is debatable. Facts are debatable. That was never reality in this country until recently.
One last question before we go, because you opened up Pandora's box there. We are dealing in a post-truth, post-fact society. Where do we even begin? Or better yet, how do we fight back against a system that is as interested in lies, or more interested in lies than it is the truth, and it has the ability to spin everything into a half-truth and propaganda? How do we manage that?
Here's the best advice I can give you. Never let it become normal. Never let it normalize. When you hear people say, well, why are you paying attention to that? Why are you responding to that? Why are you posting about that? Oh, you know, that's just how Trump is. Oh, you know, that's just politics. Never listen to them. Always act as if, respond as if, behave as if this is abnormal. Show your outrage. Show your pain when there's extreme manipulation, when there are lies. Continue to fight it and never let it become normal to you. And if it never becomes normal to you, it'll never be normal for your children. It'll never be normal for your grandchildren, and it will be normal in this country.
You know, I'm enjoying, I said that was the last question, but if you forgive me, let me get one more in there, because I'm enjoying the conversation, because you and I have
Same
a
here, brother.
Similar tone and tenor and pattern and everything else. You know, you come from the Black church experience, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk just really quickly. We have about 2 minutes, but there seems to be a distinct difference between a person of faith like yourself and myself, who we use our faith for liberation to fight on behalf of marginalized people across this country. But we seem to be in league, or at least brethren, with folks who used to lynch us on Saturday night and go to church on Sunday morning. We only got like a minute left, but what are your thoughts on the role of faith, your faith particularly, in this fight for freedom, justice, and liberation?
My faith informs me. My politics, that is an expression of my faith. What we're seeing a lot, especially in Christian evangelical circles, they have allowed their politics to inform their faith. My faith informs my politics. I actually teach a course at the university I teach at called Dr. King and the Church as a Social Change Agent. In that class, I have white students, black students, brown students. I have everybody there. And we look at how church and King's utilization of the church transformed the social narrative. Remember this about policy, because that is what King transformed, and that's what we should transform. Policy is a social contract between the community and the government. Good policy is always spiritual in nature. So all of my brothers and sisters, regardless of their faith background, if you're fighting for good policy, you're on the right side of the spirit.
Absolutely appreciate that. Dr. Rashad RICHEY, he's a former director of the Democratic Party of Georgia. He's a radio show talk host, the Rashad RICHEY Morning Show, Rolling Out Magazine editor at large. He's all over the place, and he's with us on the conversation today. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you.
The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and Android. Download to get more TYT content at tyt.com/app.